I'm Dr. Tracy Stecker, and welcome to the Choosing Help podcast. Choosing Help presents conversations about courage, connection, and the transformative power of asking for support. Through candid discussions, expert insights, and real-world stories, this podcast breaks down stigma and opens doors to understanding. Join our community committed to compassion and courage. Because when we choose help, we choose life. This is Dr. Tracy Stecker, and I'm joined today by Doctors Ashrafiune and Dr. Allan, and we're going to talk about politics today and really that political anxiety that a lot of us are feeling, and talk a little bit about how to have conversations about politics with friends, family members, coworkers, neighbors who might have a different team than you have. I don't think anybody needs to for me to explain the political situation right now, but I'm going to set it up just for the purpose of this conversation. It seems like we have different teams. There's a team A, and team A has a belief system. And one of their primary beliefs right now seems to be that members of team B, if team B it wins or is in charge, then everything about team B will be compromised. And it may lead to even their death. Everything they love will be killed. Then there's this team B who has their belief system, and they believe that if team A wins, everything about their belief system will be eliminated and they'll die. And then we have team C who's looking at team A and team B, and they're thinking they're all going to be the death of all of us. And because the tension is so high with this fear of everything that we know and love will be compromised if this other team wins, it's making it very challenging to um, be at peace politically, to have conversations with people who are maybe representing another team or on another team. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There's two aspects of it we're going to talk about today. One is that anxiety, how to maybe lower that anxiety a little bit if possible. We have Dr. Allan here today, who is an expert on anxiety, and he's going to talk with us a little bit today about how to manage some of that anxiety. And then that will be important on how to have these political conversations, how to have the conversation. One of the main rules is going to be don't come to the conversations ready to tell the other person why everything they believe is wrong. So if that's not on the table, what's left to talk about? And then we're gonna give some maybe guidance on how to have more productive, healthy, fulfilling conversations. So I'm gonna open it up to you guys. Please give your input on what you think maybe the political scene is, maybe that political anxiety. I know both of you have perspectives, and I'm just giving my little shout out, but either one of you go ahead and jump in and let us know your thoughts.
All
Yeah,
right.
what I think actually your description of it really kind of paints a good picture of things that like basically team A thinks everything that team B does is wrong and is the this as existential threat and vice
Mhm.
versa. And so right off the bat, we're talking about like, essentially life or death situations seemingly.
That's what it
And
seems like.
so
Yeah.
there's like some sort of like extremes in thinking basically that really kind of ignores, the nuance in situations. And so, if you're kind of thinking from that perspective of this all or nothing kind of thinking, it's going to drive things like fear and anxiety and depression and all sorts of negative emotions are going to come along with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so what's funny when we were thinking about this topic is as a psychologist, I know it makes no sense for me to push back on your framing, pointing out while both teams A and team B have problems, there's certain problems by one of the teams that I would say kind of go over my red line. But as I thought about that, I mean, that's the crux of this whole issue, right? So, even me as a, somebody who's trained to kind of recognize how thoughts and emotions can impact each other, I have this conviction, about the world and about which side is doing what things that maybe they shouldn't be doing. Um, and I again think I'm well read enough to that this conviction is supported by evidence, but on the other hand, I'm a scientist, and I know we can't really ever prove the null. And so, I was just giving this some thought. So, despite how much I rally against the sentiment, I think it's important to recognize for all of us, I think, that your level of confidence in what you believe, actually, the data bears it out that it has nothing at all to do with whether it's true or not. So I think it's
Hmm.
very important for everybody when they're having these discussions to keep in mind that we think we know things and sometimes because we're human, we're wrong. And so I was just sort of thinking about that because we have Easter coming up, and I will be seeing the family, and so you sort of think about, all right, well, how do we have these good faith conversations? And I know later you're going to bring up the issue of, you know, do we or should we have these good faith conversations?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there is definitely a time and a place for these conversations. And then there are people to have the conversations with, and then maybe people that you can't. It's not going to be productive, and that's okay too. But we all learn more if you can recognize somebody might be on another team, but we learn more when we understand that even though they might be on a different team, we're all still humans. We're on team H, team human. I'm representing today, team human.
So that actually, I think, brings up another issue that I feel like has just kind of developed over the years, which is this idea of politics as sports, right?
Mm.
So, now it's my team and they can do no wrong, or if you're Tracy and it's the Bears, it's my team and they can do no right. Um, you know, or if you're Lee and it's the Bills, they're my team and they're gonna rip my heart out, damn it. Um, but again, like, part of our problem might be that politics with, social media and all these other things has become something that is all about drawing eyeballs, and then people feel like they need to pick a side because things are really presented in these kind of black and white
But I
uh,
think, Nick, I think that's it precisely. Politics as teams might be part of the problem because then there is a win and a loss. And that's really, there's no place for that in our community. Everybody's going to lose if that's the game.
Well, again, not to get too far into politics, the actual politics, but that is kind of what has happened. Like the lack of compromise. What used to happen in politics is sides would come together and basically, you could get a little bit of what your side wanted, but it would come with a compromise of taking a little bit of what the other side wanted. And now
Yeah.
we seem to be in this world where people think it's all a zero-sum game.
All right.
Well, I think
So
the
let's
tough
do
part
the,
too is like how we end up receiving messages too. That we end up, there's actually tons of things that, people in Congress kind of come together and vote on, but we don't necessarily hear about any of those things. We hear about maybe about some more of the big ticket items. And so those big ticket items end up getting kind of um, there's teams and those big ticket items, and so those are the only ones we hear about, and we don't hear about the compromise and and other things that do come up. And so already the messages that we're getting from the media are just that team A is with team A and team B is with team B, and that there isn't actual any overlap at all, which isn't necessarily the case. And I remember years back, there was like a softball game. where one of I think the whip or something like that got shot.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah. It
remember what
was
I'm talking about? And I
Steve
remember
Scalise.
Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, I think, came on and sort of said that like, there are tons of things that they actually agree about, that it isn't like complete tribalism on the Senate floor and stuff like that. And so I think it's important for us to kind of keep that in mind because one, it's how we receive the messages from the media, and actually that's how the politicians end up kind of playing into that same kind of message as well. And they don't talk about the times where they did come together and agree on something.
So I just want to organize our talk a little bit because I think what you're both saying is really important for our part one, which is how to bring down some of our anxiety. So we're going to talk about these two things. One, how to bring down some of that anxiety. A lot of us are feeling scared, like Lee said, existential. I can't say that word. Existential threat. It does feel like if one team wins, then it'll compromise everything we know and love and believe. So. Bringing down some of that anxiety a little bit by doing the things that both of them are saying. And then two, I also want to discuss how to have conversations with people who might have a totally different team. So right now we're in this first part, which is to recognize that the teams aren't feuding as much as we might believe that they are.
Well, and a lot of the feuding is performative. Like that's
Yes.
so
Yeah.
it's stuck in this cycle, politicians, media, and constituents where um like the messages that sell are those combative ones, those ones. Actually, I think this gets a little bit back to this idea of how do we deal with this fear and anxiety. I mean, I think one of the things to keep in mind as a consumer of media is the fear and anxiety, those stories are going to sell. And so if you are just getting your news passively through your social media feeds, you're much more likely to kind of see the world as this terrible, dangerous place that also happens to be filled with a bunch of hilarious kittens. Um, versus if you were, you know, consuming news, which is kind of the way that people maybe would go about it more so. You'd sit down and you'd watch your evening news and you kind of learn about what's happening in the world. But now with 24-hour news cycles and this attention economy, we're all kind of stuck in this cycle and um, yeah, I think this conversation is important to think about how do we break out of these cycles besides getting rid of all the social medias.
And so on a big picture level, you're talking a little bit about how to um, reduce that anxiety a little bit, just kind of change your thought about it a little bit. But on an individual level, we all have family members and neighbors and colleagues, friends who might have different belief systems than us. So how do we test it? How do we test some of our anxiety? To see if it's even true. Like you were saying, just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. Just because somebody has a different side doesn't mean that they're that different from you necessarily. They might even have the same ultimate goal, but how they get there might be different. How do you test whether or not that's true? Because a lot of people I think are hesitant right now to have conversations because there's a very real fear that the second you have the conversation, it's going to become a shouting match of, well, you're just wrong and you're just wrong and this is why how you need to think and this is how you need to think. But how do you test? How do you really just sit back and test whether some of your thoughts are true on an individual level?
Well, I think part of it is allowing yourself to have those conversations because the way you described it there is that if we're letting sort of our fear dictate whether or not we're even going to have the conversations, then,
Yeah.
typically, one of the more common responses to fear is avoiding.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't if we avoid and we don't have the conversations, then we're not kind of bringing in any kind of new information into the situation. And so allowing yourself initially to have the conversation is a way to kind of get more information and realize that people are complex. And just because they believe one thing doesn't mean that, one thing you don't agree with doesn't mean that they don't agree with you on everything at all, everything
Hmm.
completely.
Hmm.
And so it's really important for us to kind of realize that. Um, uh, we really should have those conversations to be able to learn more about the other person and what they believe in across the board, not just in one category or in one
Yeah.
topic.
So even on an individual level, like you might be saying to yourself, I can't talk to somebody who's on the other side. I can't talk to them. I can't even have that conversation. That thought isn't even necessarily true. You can test just that thought. Can you have a conversation? Approach it, pick your person carefully, but approach it with curiosity. Hey, I'd really like to talk to you about your beliefs. I don't want this to be flinging insults at each other, but I would like to understand better. So
Yeah.
you can even test some of your own thoughts. I can't talk to that person. I hate those people. Whatever it is you're saying to yourself, even that you can challenge. Is that even true or not true?
Yeah.
Will the conversation become contentious? It seems like that could be true, but it might not be true. You could actually have a conversation and test it out.
Well, and
Well, and
plus,
I
like,
think
if the person has something you don't agree with, and like Nick was saying, it's a red line for you.
Hmm.
There, if you don't have a conversation with them, you don't necessarily know. They might be able to contextualize why they have that belief. That what like
Hmm.
okay, that makes more sense to me. I still
More
disagree with
sense.
you, but like okay, I see where you're coming from now. But if
Hmm.
you don't have that conversation, you're never gonna get that.
Yeah.
so. I think a lot of what we're saying and talking about actually brings me back to one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is uncertainty. And I think a lot of I think some of this is driven by people's fear of uncertainty. Generally, most of us don't like uncertain situations. We kind of like resolutions. We like to know what's happening. Unless the resolution was how they decided to end Game of Thrones, people mostly like some sort of conclusion. But a lot of times when we're having these conversations with people or we're discussing these fraught political issues, we sort of develop our position, and then that influences how we think about and take in new information. And I think instead we have to be more comfortable sort of recognizing that some of our positions can be tenuous, some of them can't be changed. And sometimes it's okay to not have a strong position, which I think makes it easier to have those sorts of conversations
Hmm.
when you don't stake these issues out as, kind of life and death.
Hmm.
And then
You approach it with curiosity.
yep, and I wanted to have that lens also through how you approach somebody else because I talked about approaching the issue with curiosity, but I think that same thing can be true with somebody else's opinion and how they feel about things. And we were talking about, I think Lee, you were mentioning kind of having this thought about how the conversation would go. Right. And we're uncertain how this conversation will go. And so often we decide, it's likely to go in the worst possible manner. And if that's the case, then of course we're much less likely to have that conversation. Um,
Hmm.
so I think just sort of recognizing, you know, I mean, I guess maybe even understanding like what is my purpose of this conversation? Because if you just want to talk to people from the other party to try to score cheap political points, then that actually, when I get to when we talk later about should you be having the conversations, and I would say no, it's not really going to accomplish anything. But
Right.
if it is to learn more about, other people, to form closer relationships, to understand the world better, then yeah, I think
Mhm.
we need to have those conversations.
And even to reduce your fear, because there is a lot of fear right now. There's a lot of political anxiety, and the you could have the belief that I don't have to feel this anxious. I can engage in conversations to make myself feel a little better. I could learn more. Maybe with learning more, I won't have this anxiety. I won't have this fear. I won't be avoiding some of these conversations. They don't have to be explosive. Even that is a testable thought. It might, some people might believe that all political conversations get explosive. Is that true or not true? I've had tons of them myself, and they did not all get explosive. In fact, very few did. So it's just a thought, maybe that you could test. So why don't we go ahead and go into how to have a conversation, a loaded, emotional conversation with somebody. I talk about it a lot in my book. There's a whole chapter on how to have conversations with somebody who, when it is going to be provocative and emotional or potentially explosive. And so there's some basic rules to attend to when you are approaching a conversation such as the one that we're talking about now. I'm going
Tracy,
to
just
just
to
list.
be clear, that's your book, Choosing Help, that's available at Amazon and all the other bookstores.
Yeah, you want to see it? I have it right here.
Oh my God, I would love to. Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Gonna have to order my copy.
You already did.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to order another copy.
Okay, so four things to remember when you're having a very emotional conversation with somebody, potentially emotional, provocative, explosive conversation with somebody. Approach it with empathy. First thing to do, um, be empathic. Think about putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. You already know your stance, more or less, for whatever it is. You're approaching the conversation to better understand what their thoughts are. So be empathic. One, two is be respectful. Um, give the amount of respect you would like to have returned to you. Appreciate that they're another human and you're connecting with them. Just be respectful. So that's two. Empathy, respect, and be genuine. Be yourself. Conversations work better when you are approaching them as your authentic self. So whatever you bring to the table, you got three people right here. We all have slightly different personalities. Two of us love being irreverent. One of us does not. Um, probably
What are
with
you
the two of
talking
us who
about?
are what?
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
I
the two
hate
of us
being
that are more
irreverent.
irreverent, we might bring that to the table, and that would be perceived as okay. If you're not like that, it can look a little odd. So be authentic, be your true curious self, if you are curious. And then the fourth one is very important, and all of us are really, really, really bad at it, particularly during these kind of conversations, which is listening. Make sure you're engaged in listening. It's called active listening, and it requires three different steps. You have to use your ears to hear what the person is saying. You have to use your brain to understand and process what they're saying. And then you use your mouth. This is the part where everybody misses. Use your mouth to confirm that you heard it correctly. Give them an opportunity to confirm that you heard it or change it a little bit to make it more accurate. Those three steps have to happen, and the active listening can go both ways. So you are actually listening to what they're saying and confirming that you heard it correctly, and then they are actually listening to you. So having those four steps makes these conversations go much more smoothly and respectfully. Um, and it can provide a lot more information that you're hoping to get. Then the other things that would maybe be out of bounds, like what Nick's been referring to, as soon as insults start flying, you are not being respectful. That the conversation is really done. It's no longer going to be healthy to continue the conversation. You can pick it up later when everybody is calmed down, but at that moment, if anybody starts flinging emotions, the conversation's really over. Anytime you're starting to be insulting, I meant not emotions. Emotions are okay. Emotions are totally real and valid, but insults are out of bounds.
Although
Um,
I would say with emotions, you do have to be careful because we all have that red line where or I don't know, sort of that I always think about it like the oil gauge on your car. You have that line where it kind of gets into the danger zone. And I think it's important to recognize that sometimes in those moments when we're too emotional, we may not be thinking that clearly. So
yeah.
um I think for these conversations, particularly if it's an issue that's very salient to you or very important, you'll want to be kind of assessing how worked up it gets you because you may find that you get kind of so overwhelmed that you end up being the irrational one in this conversation.
hmm And it's okay to say, I would like to continue this conversation, but I need to take five. Go take a walk, calm down, take some deep breaths. Get yourself back to a place where you're feeling more emotionally centered and pick it back up. You can pick up these conversations later. They don't have to happen in just one burst. You can wait and do it in whatever way might be most effective for you. Lee, you look like you have a thought.
No, I don't. I think you guys have covered it mostly. I just wanted to make sure, yeah, Nick had mentioned this too, but like, a lot of it is uh yeah, I don't know where I was going.
You were right. We were
That's what
right, Lee.
I'll just leave it at, yeah, I think you guys have covered what, sort of the main points I was going to make.
He's still going, hey, I'm a reverend too.
No, I'll stay with my reverence.
All right, so what other circumstances you're approaching? You want to understand a friend, a family member, a coworker, whoever it happens to be. You want to sit down and really talk with them. They feel like the type of person that could give you information that you might be missing. They're on another team. You really want to understand this better. You're feeling anxious. You're like, this is a person I feel like I could have this conversation. I could approach them. We could talk this out, and maybe I'll understand the other side team better. Remembering those four things: have empathy, be respectful, be you, and engage in listening. As soon as insults start flying, that's a red flag. You're gonna stop it. If you feel like you're too emotional, that maybe is a red flag. Either postpone it for a little while, reschedule it, or stop it. What are some other red flags that would say, you know what? I think we've crossed a line right now.
I remember what I was going to say before.
What is it?
Um,
Go ahead.
well, so a lot of it is you've been talking about how we receive messages from other people, and I think it's important to talk about how we communicate with other people too. And I think that
Hmm
those same those four components are still going to be important in my communication out to that other person that I'm talking to. Being genuine, being respectful, being empathic. Because ultimately, if I'm communicating with the person and I'm just sort of um, not being myself, or I'm being sort of rude and um, insulting to the person, and I'm not sort of thinking from, I'm not also kind of thinking like from their shoes or their point of view as well, then
hmm
ultimately everything that I'm going to say to them it's more likely to go in one ear and out the other. And
hmm
so those four things are both important in terms of how I'm receiving messages and also how I'm sending them back out too.
And I'll
Yeah.
say for those people who are also like, yeah, but there are some beliefs that I really think I should be talking to these people about and they should change them. If you want to persuade people, uh, it's not through telling them they're wrong. It's actually through understanding their position, finding common ground, and then working on the persuasion.
Mhm.
So, just telling somebody that they're incorrect and maybe that they're a terrible person for having those thoughts is not going to persuade. But really openly engaging in these conversations, hearing their side, respecting their side enough to kind of point out when it's similar to what you believe or it aligns, that's actually going to go a lot further in kind of getting somebody to potentially be on board to at least look at things through your lens.
Yeah, I think that was really important. Is it okay if I repeat it? I want to make sure I understand it as well. So I totally agree that telling somebody that they're wrong is probably not going to change their mind. They're not going to go, "Oh, thank you for that information. Now I think like you." Hardly ever will work like that. But you said something, and I'm already blanking, so you might have to say it again. Uh, in order to be persuasive with somebody, you have to come together, understand, really truly understand their position, find the common ground between how you think and how they think, join them there, and then that helps. That at that point you can be more persuasive on maybe some of those differences, whether they're minor or major. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. And so it I think echoes a lot of what we're saying. So what we're saying to do genuinely, which is, to listen to people, to understand and respect their perspective, that uh, goes a long way towards also helping people understand when maybe they have some perspectives that are a bit off kilter. So all
Hmm.
of this work that we're talking about that you would have to do in these conversations, I I find it interesting because not only should it make that conversation go better, but it also actually might kind of help you uh, accomplish the goals of persuasion if that is, one of your goals.
Hmm. Yeah, so going back a little bit, going back to our teams. We got Team A who believes that Team B is going to be the death of them, and Team B who believes Team A is going to be the death of them, and Team C who believes Team A and Team B are going to be the death of all of us. That on a global level is contributing to a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress right now. And it's probably not accurate information. So, on an individual level, all of us as individuals can come back and at least approach conversations to start testing whether or not those thoughts are true. Let's lower the temperature a little bit on an individual level. The three of us are not going to change the political scene globally, and we probably don't want to. Well, maybe one of us wants to, but I don't want to. On an individual level, though, I think when there are people who are really struggling with anxiety and struggling with even how do I have these conversations? How do I ask for help? How do I know that I can trust somebody if I'm struggling with depression or anxiety? How do I know who I can even talk to about some of these things? We're giving some guidance on one, consider whether your thoughts are in fact true. You can test them a little bit. And then two, how to have conversations. You can start with people that you've been friends with forever or a family member that you trust and have the conversation to really truly understand the other side and go from there, maybe approaching more um a, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but joining of each other instead of this division.
Synthesis?
Synthesis. My tongue does not
Synthesis?
like that word. Yeah. Any last words from you guys?
Um, no, other than this was a fun experience, and hopefully it'll prepare people for any conversations they might want to have in the future.
Hmm. They're doable.
Yep, absolutely. I think the other piece too is like we talked about this in the context of politics, but really this, it really can, all these things can kind of apply more generally too, across other,
Absolutely.
hot button issues
Hmm.
outside of politics too.
Yeah.
Yep, very
Anything that
much.
feels really explosive or emotional, you can use what we talked about today to have more productive conversations.
Yep. In fact, you want to impress your spouse tonight, go home, listen to what they said, repeat it back to them in your own words. They'll be like, "Oh my God, you're
That
amazing."
exactly, that's what they'll say. Yes, yes. Thank you for hearing me. Yeah, you're right.
For
Try
once.
it for once. All right. Thank you for joining us today at Choosing Help. And if you would like to contact us or any more information, you can go to our website at choosinghelp.com. Thank you.